you go out and buy 10 properties and you learn about a mistake or two you made, you're going to be paying that mistake 10 times. Whereas if you buy one property and you figure out that mistake or two or whatever, you're going to avoid that mistake 9 times. And dude, that just sunk in like, oh my God.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jarrod Ochsenbein, fellow real estate investor who is also managing a demanding W-2 job and his family. Jarrod started investing less than 2 years ago and hit the ground running, buying up 3 properties in Arizona, which he deploys the rent by room, also known as co-living strategy.
First original plan was pick out by the house, add bedrooms. And so I originally wanted to do the Sam Wiegert way, which was do the annual leases in the rooms. But then I found out I was trying to figure out a way to do bonus depreciation and all that for tax write-offs, because that was my purpose for tax incentives. But come to find out, it wasn't going to work. I ran into Mark Kohler. He had told me about the short-term rental loophole. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so that's what we did. And then we were able to do the cost segregation and the bonus depreciation. And as a result, we ended up getting about 45 grand back in taxes for that year.
When he first bought them, he was on hiatus from his W-2, but he recently went back to work and is now juggling everything from remotely self-managing these properties to his family and his job.
So I don't plan on doing co-living forever. Who knows what the future holds? You know, you have those different milestones, and we hit that milestone of having all our rental income pay for our bills, personal and business. So that was fantastic. And so now the money we make with Intel just goes right towards real estate, right? So it's like, that's a good problem to have. But I can't just live off it, because if we have a bad month or something happens, we're screwed.
He is also an active networker who seeks to add value to the communities he's in and is constantly on the search for new insights and wisdom from other investors around him. I've enjoyed getting to know Jarrod over the past few months, and this interview holds nuggets that you can apply on your own journey. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast, where we dive deep into the intersection of career, family, and finances. Learn the mindsets, tips, and strategies to help you on your personal journey to build a life of abundance and purpose for you and your family. Now here's your host, Aaron Amin. All right, welcome back to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm joined by my friend and fellow investor, Mr. Jarrod Ochsenbein. Did I get your name right?
Yeah,
nailed it.
Ochsenbein.
All right, Jarrod and I have gotten to know each other for the last few months through a school community we're in with Michael Zuber, the author of the One Rental at a Time. He's built a pretty amazing community there. Tons of investors getting together, engaging, sharing wisdom and knowledge. And Jarrod, I would have to say, is probably the top contributor there. I've been really impressed just seeing all the different insights and just how openly you share your story. And I was even more impressed when I found out you had only been investing in real estate for less than 2 years. So before I go any further in your introduction, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to my audience in your own words.
Yeah, sure. I'll do that. And then I'll comment on that ORET cool thing. But yeah, so I'm Jarrod Ochsenbein. I got started in real estate in April of 2023 because I read a book. I actually wasn't looking to get started in real estate. I know that sounds funny, but I was in corporate America for 23 years, back again now, but I was looking to save money on taxes. So I did some research. I found a book called Tax-Free Wealth, Tom Wheelwright. I read that book. It blew my freaking mind. And basically in that book, it said real estate was the answer. And it basically said, I'm an idiot because I've always wanted to get into real estate, just never pulled the trigger. 2001 was a time, after 2008 was another time, and I never did it. I just was focused on corporate America. Read the book, and then that's where I found out that Tom Wheelwright was the CPA for Robert Kiyosaki, and that's where I found out about Rich Dad Poor Dad, which most people start Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'm backwards. So that's how I got started. Analyzed markets around the U.S. for about 5 months, well, about 2 months, and then I decided Arizona was the place for me. And then it took me 3 months or so to analyze. And then that's when I pulled the trigger on my first property in August of 2023.
Awesome.
So,
and you use a specific type of strategy that I think is becoming more and more trendy over time. Rent by room or co-living, are those two synonymous?
Yeah, they are. It's kind of the co-living is the umbrella and rent by room is also the umbrella. And there's different ways to slice that pie inside
Awesome.
there. But
So we'll double back and unpack that strategy, but I'll give you a chance to comment on the school community.
yeah, the school thing. So I found real estate. I don't know if you've ever found anything like this in your life, but when you find something, you're like, holy crap, here's the answer. And then you test your hypothesis, you pilot something and then it works. You're like, hey, everybody, check this out. And most people don't want to hear it, right? So they're busy in their lives and all that. So the school community comes along and it's one place where I can just spew all the stuff that nobody will listen to me on the street with, right? I mean, some people do, like in the communities and real estate meetups, okay. But in general, it's always on my mind. I consume a ton. I just been completely obsessed with it, which, it's good and bad, but I've backed off a little bit, family and stuff. I have 3 kids and a wife, and my wife's on board, so that's good. But yeah, it's a place where I can go and like-minded people. I'm in multiple communities, and other communities are pretty big, and so it gets missed and everything. But in the school community, I can spew it out, and I also get real-time feedback, and it's amazing, man. So this isn't meant to be like a school advertisement for one rental at a time, but both you and I met there, and it's fantastic, man. I freaking
Yeah,
love it.
so that's
So
a great community, but also just being in a community in general where you feel like you have a tribe of people where you can openly share. And I think what you're hitting at, I always say it, we as real estate investors who are passionate about this topic sometimes feel like the crazy person in the room. If you're in a room with normies, even your family, right? My wife,
yeah.
similarly, she's passionate about the topic, but not quite as much as I am. And there are many times where I come and I have something in my head that I'm excited to talk about. And I'm realizing that it's just not either appropriate or it's not going to land well with most people. So having somewhere where you can go and chat and not feel crazy is nice too.
You nailed it. That's the first time I've had anybody say that, like, out loud, and that's true for me too, right? So I love
Yeah.
that. So
But further, so I want to get into the strategy and I also want to come back to just the fact that you've been telegraphing your journey and documenting it and you have your own channel as it started and unfolded. And that's something I think that's a really important characteristic. If people are comfortable putting it out there, what they're doing, it's amazing the kind of magnetic the types of conversations you can start. You can end up in partnerships. You can end up, like you said, getting real-time feedback because you're putting yourself out there and sharing what you're doing. So if you are doing something that maybe is leading towards a mistake that somebody else has made and you put it out there and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this deal in this place." And someone can say, "Oh no, I did something similar and this is what happened to me. Please take that into account before you move forward." Those are all very valuable bits of lessons and again, just things that you could only really benefit from if you put yourself out there. But yeah, so I guess let's start with how did you end up on the strategy that you ended up on?
yeah, I ended up there because my goal was like a lot of people's cash flow, right? And ultimately, I wanted to get out of the daily grind, the W-2, get out of corporate America, and then funny enough, I'm back in. And so I looked, and I was looking like nationwide for the markets. And then I was originally going to do the traveling nurses thing, right? So I was looking at Texas and Florida because Texas had 21 or 22 level 1 trauma centers, and Florida had 9. And I didn't like Florida because, well, now with the hurricanes, it makes sense. But back then I was looking at it and the insurance costs, now they're crazy. But back then it was like, I didn't like that, and then Texas property taxes. And so Arizona was like, okay, cool. I was shifting my focus at that point. They had hospitals, a ton of them and all that. But I kind of found co-living. I stumbled on it. I think it was Pace Morby who had mentioned it on Pad Split and was on one of his videos. I'm in the sub 2 Gator community. And, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," and I dug into it, and I was like, "Man, that's a lot of cash flow," and the numbers made sense. So that's where I first stumbled on it was through the Pace Morby and the Pad Split thing, but it fit everything I was looking for, which is pretty rare. I think most people have these, "Here's my ultimate goal, and if I get 80% of it, cool." It was kinda weird because it hit all of them, like the cash flows, even at 75%, how I run my numbers. Well, actually, I'll back up a little bit. My goal was cash flow with the potential for appreciation, but I really liked multifamily, but I didn't like the debt that typically was associated with multifamily. So this is kind of a hybrid of all that, right? It's got good cash flow. I've got multiple units per house. So if I lose a member, I'll say member instead of tenant because that's how member agreement. We can get in that later if you want. But if I lose a member, I'm not down. I'm not looking for that. I don't have that zero. I don't have that vacancy, right? So it just figures differently, and it made sense to me. And so man, I was like, hey, this is great. So I'm an IT guy, an IT manager by trade. And so typically in the IT world, you do a hypothesis, proof of concept, and then a pilot, right? So that's exactly what I did. It was do, do, do. And then the pilot was successful. I'm like, holy crap, this worked. And so I just went
So
for
my
it. So
favorite part of there's a lot of stuff I like, but you entered this search in April of 2023. This was about a year or so after everyone declared broadly that there's no more deals out there. It's impossible. And instead of just throwing your hands up and saying, I missed the wave, I can't invest in real estate, you did research. You looked at a couple different states and you also looked at a couple different business models. and you found something that works, that fits your hypothesis. And I believe, I can't remember if you just said it or if I've heard you say it before, but you underwrite all these properties as if they're long-term rentals, right? And then so that worst case scenario, if something happens with pad split or co-living, or you can't use this business model, that you're not going to be totally upside down as a single family long-term rental. Is that right?
Exactly. Because you know, I just want to make sure. I think it was Cody from I forget the guy's last name, but he does multifamily. And one of his things is, how do you acquire properties and never lose them, right? And he'd said that repeatedly. And it's like, man, it's weird. I'm in all these different communities and I pick little pieces from all of them and put it in my own little thing. And I love that. I consume a lot of content and I watch a lot of macroeconomic stuff too to see trends and things. And also, I'll say one more thing though, real quick, is a part of that too is the first deal was like that, and then the second two I did with DSCR loans. It was actually part of the lending requirement. But it's really odd because I had to put 25% down on the second house because I'm a novice investor instead of 20%. And then a month later, I came back and said, "Hey, I want to buy another one." And they're like, "Hey, by the way, I still haven't been through a tax return yet. I don't have any taxes." And so, as a novice investor, you're a higher risk, right? Especially with this kind of strategy. And so they had to run the loans as a long-term rental. So it forced me into that, which I want to do anyway. And I like that little, especially new, that little checks and balances. And so then the third one, I had about 30% down. I was like, damn, this is getting expensive. So, but it worked out. So I was very passionate, I guess. And I just believed in it like 100%, which is pretty rare for me, to actually believe in something that much, enough to sell all my toys. I sold my Jeep and my Denali and my toy hauler. I was a big off-road guy. And so that's what got my wife on board. I know I'm going in different directions here, but I just want to say that at the beginning, there wasn't a single person in my entire network that said my personal network, because when I started, I didn't have a investing network that said, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Quit your job and go invest in real estate." Not a single person. And looking at it, I get that, but I just did enough research, and the army and my history, my life taught me enough that, you know what, I knew I was going to do it. And I don't know if most people have that sort of mentality, but I just knew somehow, some way I was going to make it work. And been working out so
You had
far.
conviction. You had the discipline to do the research. You didn't just say, I'm going to do it and then go buy the first thing that showed up on your Zillow search, right? You had the discipline to do the research, take your time to find the right market. You built the right business model. And then I really like what you said about the lenders having this kind of check and balance where they're not even going to approve a loan for something that's not going to cash flow in the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario here being a long
Right.
term rental. So that means you could have bought it as a long term rental and made a little bit of cash flow, but instead you found this other business model that really allowed you to accelerate. And having 20 plus years in IT and tech leading up to that, I'm sure that gave you enough capital. Like you said, you even got rid of some of the other vehicles and stuff that you had so that you could really be in a strong financial position heading into it. There's a lot of stuff there. Actually, really, I want to click into, so you were in the military, you said? How
Yeah, in the
long?
army. Yeah, just 3 years. I needed that. See, this is why I'm a tad bit upset, and I'll go into a little tangent here. So my generation, we were told, in yours too, probably, but we were told, hey, get a good job, right? And then, work your life and then retire at 65 or whatever. So I was like, all right, well, I can't get a good job because you need to get the college education. Well, I couldn't afford, we weren't rich. We were probably lower middle class or something like that. So we didn't have a college fund. So the only way I could get into college was the army. So I joined the army to get the college fund, got the college fund, and then found out that was only good for about a year and a
Oh,
half,
wow.
right? So then I'm working 3 jobs. Yeah, it wasn't when I joined, I think it was like 20 or 25 grand, and that went fast, right? And even at that, I had to do community college, which was fine. I did 2 years community college and then was working 3 jobs, then I got into Phoenix, University of Phoenix. Did that, I first got the associates, then I got the bachelor's. Intel paid for I ended up working at Intel. And Intel paid for my bachelor's, which was cool. But I do all this stuff to get the degree, to get the job, and I get the job and I work, and then I'm 50 now. And then I figure out at 49 that, I mean, yeah, we're doing okay, right? But if I lost the job, we're screwed. And so I was like, dude, this isn't working. So I had this epiphany, like, holy crap, the taxes every time I moved up the ladder, because I started off as just a help desk guy, IT guy. And then I moved up to like a team lead guy, and then I moved into management, and then got to second level management, and then making more money. And every time I made more money, I got tax and tax and tax. I'm like, this sucks. I was like, this can't be it, man. So I'm a slow learner. It took me a while, 23 years to be exact. And then I was like, all right, man, we gotta do something about this. And so, and then, COVID, inflation, all this stuff. I was like, dude, this isn't working. So that's where I got into
No,
real
that's so
estate.
interesting. So the time you had in the army, I'm sure that discipline, regiment, like structure is baked in. Like you can't avoid it. Even if you're not geared that way, you have no choice. Were there any other
Right.
things you took away from that chapter that you think make you successful as a real estate investor?
Yeah, the number one, the discipline for sure. Cause I was what, I don't know, I was 17 and joined, and then I got in on my right after my 18th birthday. But the one big one is the military will break you down. This is key, right? And not everybody's in the military, but they will break you down. And I'll give you an example that might resonate better. So we would go on these long, 15, 20-mile runs like every morning. So we would run off post and you'd run through, I was in Germany. So you'd run through towns, cobblestone roads or whatever. And then you come back and you run past the gate for the front post, right? They would do this all the time. And you never knew how many times. So you're tired, you run 5 miles and you come back and you think, oh, we're going back on post. Yay. Once in a while they would. But then you run by the front post, you're like, "Shit," and you go out, run a couple more miles, and you come back, and then you run past it again, and they would do this. So you would just push yourself and push it, and you never knew, and it would break you down. So that kinda stuff, granted, that's physical, but there's a lot of mental to that too. Well, that translated into real estate with like, all right, no matter what happens with this strategy, this strategy seems to work for others. There's cash flow there. If I can just get there. I'll figure it out some way, I'll get there. And so that's what the mentality was. Just go for it. And I learned that from the military, and then the discipline as well. And then the structure and organization, all that from Intel was like my corporate job really helped as well. And finances, I managed a huge multi-million dollar budget and things like that. So all those things sort of, you know, pushed me into it helped me out a
No,
lot
I
in real
love
estate.
that, and I think what I like about your career arc and you starting in the military, like you said, you started at a help desk at Intel and you worked your way through all these various progressions over 23 years. You probably made more money, took on more responsibility, but you participated in every level of the business. That's the thing I think that sticks out to me because some people that are like professional managers, they've never really done the grunt work themselves. They come in and they tell the people on the front lines how to do stuff. And it's hard to earn stripes and credibility when you haven't actually done the work that the people the entry level and the earlier career people are doing. And so I think it's great that you have the perspective of that entire journey and then not only the jobs but like you said, making different levels of money, growing through different tax brackets, so that by the time you finally read that book, Tax Free Wealth, I forget the name of it, but I know exact.
Tax Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. Fabulous book. Everybody I meet, I tell them they have to read
But
it.
see, if you read that book when you were 20 years old, it might not have done anything for you. But after
Yeah.
23 years of climbing the ranks and getting all that perspective, both from a career standpoint and financially, you started to realize, holy crap, like I'm probably leaving a lot on the table by not exploring some of these other ways to deploy money and maybe even thinking about employment in general in a different light. And so I think it's cool that you found it when you did, because I don't know that it would have had the same impact if it was 10, 15 years earlier. And you were also
That
capitalized at that point, right? You had been able to save up money so that you could actually do
yeah.
something about it.
There's something to be said for that because I spent a lot of time kicking myself in the butt after I read that book because, like I mentioned earlier, in 2001 or so after the dot com there, so I lived in Oregon at the time, but in Arizona, I think at that time the 101 loop hadn't been done, and I had family in Arizona, and there was a whole development that was being built. It's like for 80 grand, there was a house up there that was nowhere near a freeway. And then after that freeway was built, I think it jumped to like 120. Anyway, now it's like $670,000, something like that. But at the time, I wanted to buy that house, and I didn't because a family member said, "Oh, great, you could buy it, and I could move in there." I was like, "Oh, I'm not dealing with that," so I didn't do it. And then the 2008 thing happened, and then I was like, "Oh, cool, I'm gonna," when things dip, and they were dipping and dipping and dipping, and I wanted to buy then, and I didn't because I was in corporate, and I just really started focusing on the career, and it took off and everything. And so I just never really pulled the trigger. So here's what happened. When I read that book, Tax Free Wealth, essentially what it said was, I'm a dumbass, right? But looking back on it, I almost guarantee you at that time in the 2000s, 2005, six, something like that, I would have been one of those people that was leveraging those arms, and I would have been caught up in that mess. So I think everything happens for a reason, and that's probably why. Because I would have been one of those guys that would have at that time. Now I'm not. I'm the other way around. I'm not leveraged. I'm 60% loan to value, right? Largely because of the down payments, a little bit of appreciation. But back then, I wouldn't have been. I would have been like, oh yeah, cool, check it out. I can do this 5-1 arm or whatever it was, and boom, 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 and then I would have been caught in that thing, and I would have been screwed. So half a dozen, six of the
Yeah,
other,
and
kind
that
of.
was almost 20 years ago, so the perspective you had back then, like you said, it would have your relationship with
Yeah.
risk, your relationship with money, and nobody could have necessarily foreseen what was coming in the moment unless you're really plugged in that way. But yeah, it is interesting to think back of what the timing could have been. But I think it's also really cool that when you started in April of last year, you bought 3 within a pretty short period of time, but you did it in a smart way. And so now you're in a position where you can continue to grow, even though, like you said, you were on a hiatus from your job for a little bit and now you're back at work, but you now have the skills and you spent the time and the cycles learning the initial skills so that you have a model that you can now copy and you can either partner with other people or you might even have the teams and the systems built well enough that you don't need to. So I'm curious, like, what this kind of next chapter looks like. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself because I also want to go back and unpack the business model. But I'm curious now that you have these first 3, are you planning to continue down the same road with the co-living, or is there somewhere else you're heading?
I was gonna go like, I hadn't planned on going back to work, right? And so here's a flaw in this model. I created a single point of failure for myself for the property manager, right? Like in my job, I put in redundancies, right? Resources, people, network, all that stuff. Well, in this investing, I was thinking I was doing some of that by having, multiple members and all that. But one key flaw that I just overlooked was the property manager. So May 1st of 2024, the company PadSplit, I'll go ahead and say it, changed their fee structure, right? And they said, hey, this it used to be 14.75, and then they changed their fee structure in May. Now I'm still on the legacy plan until January of 2025, and I'll continue on with them, but I won't buy any more because of the structure is cost prohibitive for about 8 months, and I don't like that. So yeah, that was a major flaw. So I had to stop, and I'm in the middle of a pivot. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll go back to work. And I got the same salary and a signing bonus. So I was like, figure why not? I have insurance that way and we'll figure it out. So I'm in discussion with different people like financial firefighter, Marcus Shiro, talking to him about his market, kind of looking at other markets. But at the same time, I still like Arizona, but if I do it, I need to leverage a local property manager, not pad split, and do co-living, but a different way. The way that pad split does it, it's a 30-day commitment week to week. Well, the way Sam Wiegert does it, and some of the others is a different structure, which is like a long-term lease. Basically, like you'd lease in a home for a year or 6 months or 3 months, but it's a room, right? Instead of and you don't furnish it. So that's what I would go toward in Arizona with the co-living. But at the same time, I'm looking for my goal is cash flow. So I'm kind of looking at other markets. So I'm in a weird spot. So I figured get this year done, get the tax returns that'll help to be more lendable, right? And then the job, of course, having a W-2 looks good and all that stuff looks good. It was a way to go while I figure it
Yeah, no,
out.
that's really interesting. So let's start with the ones that are already operational and how you got them up and running through PadSplit. And then I would like to hear more about like the alternative model that you're thinking about in the future. So the first property when you bought it, what was your plan and how did you like ramp up for the first few months?
The plan was co-living. Actually, the original plan was what I was saying, which was pick out by the house, add bedrooms. So that's why my buy box is 2,000 square feet or so, no HOA, no pool, with plenty of parking, and in a certain cost, like under 500, let's say, under half a million for to make it profitable or worth it. And so I originally wanted to do the Sam Wiegert way, which was do the annual leases in the rooms. But then after I got started, did the construction, I found out I was trying to figure out a way to cost seg it and do bonus depreciation and all that for tax write-offs. Cause that was again, remember my purpose was for tax incentives. That was a main focus at the beginning. I still is. But come to find out, it wasn't going to work because I did some research and I thought, okay, well, I need 750 hours to be a real estate professional. I remember I left the corporate world in August of the year. Physically ran into Mark Kohler. I don't know if you know him from Main Street. And I was like, dude, you're Mark Kohler. And my wife makes so much fun of me because most people, you know, Google or, Google over the celebrities. And here's an accountant lawyer. And I'm like, hey, you're Mark Kohler. And he's like, yeah. So she's like, you're weird. I was like, yeah, that's fine. Anyway, so I got 10 minutes with this guy and he's awesome. And as a result, I actually started working with his company, Directed IRA and KQS Lawyers. But at the time, anyway, so he had told me about the short-term rental loophole. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? And so he was like, yeah, man, this is what I do, blah, blah, blah. I was like, cool. So I dug into that, talked to the accountants and got his lawyer and everything. And so that's what we did. We went ahead and furnished the rooms and ran it as an Airbnb for the end of 2023. It was good timing because it was the end of the year. So he told me to get 3 rentals under 7 days where I materially participate. So I couldn't have a property manager and it wasn't working. So it worked out perfect. And so we did that, boom. And then we were able to do the cost segregation and the bonus depreciation. And as a result, we ended up getting about 45 grand back in taxes for
So you
that
bought
year. It
all
was
3 in
cool.
that first year?
Uh, no, that was just the first one, right? So in 2023, we bought one in August, and then we had to change gears a little bit after the construction was done, and we ran it as an Airbnb for tax purposes. Hopefully, I don't get in trouble for this. And then January 1st, we flipped it over to co-living, right? So that way, we started January 1 with with pad split and started doing. And then that was the pilot. The first part was just simply for tax purposes. Yeah, we had carrying costs for a couple months extra. I think I think the Airbnbs made us a whopping because I was undercharging. I didn't care about the income. I just wanted it to be,
Yeah.
on the books. And so anyway, I think we made like a whopping $1,500 or something. I had one person say, hey, is this a scam? Because I had an 8-bedroom house that was listed for like $80 a night. Right. And they're like, I was like, no, no, I just did not. No, okay. And it worked out. But yeah, we did 3 of those, shut it down. And then January 1, we flipped over to co-living. By the way, I got 5-star reviews on all 3 of those rentals. So on every review, I look
Nice.
good, but that's the only.
I know we're getting into some tax strategy stuff, but like you said, buying it, running it as a short-term rental, using that loophole, doing a cost segregation, taking a ton of depreciation against your W-2 income from that year, plus whatever the time you weren't working, and then getting a big refund that allowed you to buy more or do whatever it is you needed
Yeah.
to. That's far outweighs lower revenue that you took in on the short-term rental itself. Very creative. And I'm sure it took you a while to plan that out. And like you said, you ran into someone who was able to help you validate that idea and then actually put it into practice. And then in 2024, it sounds like you were able to buy the 2 remaining ones and run them on the pad split model.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. I was only looking for one more. Originally I was going to go buy everything. Right. And then I went to this one rental at a time in February. Right. So I bought the one, had it up and running as a pad split in January. And then President's Day week in February is when I went to the ORAT in Vegas. And I was talking to like Dion from Financial Freedom, right? And then the Math and Lumberjack Landlord, if you guys know those guys, and they're all telling me the same thing, like, "Hey, man," they could see I was a nut job, right? And they're like, "Hey, you need to slow down, dude. You're gonna go do some dumb stuff." And I was like, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah." And then I ran into Coach Carter, and he just saw it in my eyes. He knew, right? The guys were around for a long time, and he said, "Look, man, this is what you need to hear." And he said, if you go out and buy 10 properties and you learn about a mistake or 2 you made, you're going to be paying that mistake 10 times. Whereas if you buy one property and you figure out that mistake or 2 or whatever, you're going to avoid that mistake 9 times. And dude, that just sunk in like, oh my God. So that's why I was like, slow down. And I was like, all right, let's run the pilot, which we did for a couple months. And I was looking and the pilot was working out great. We filled it in 12 days and it was cash flowing month 1. I was like, holy crap, this is working. It blew me away. And it was part of it was we did it nice, like we did granite countertops, stainless steel, very, very nice place for relative to some of the competition. And then, so a couple months, we found this property. This is a whole other story, so I probably won't get into it because it's going to take up the whole Zoom. But we ended up having our second property we bought. We had it under contract twice. If you go to my channel, you'll see the story about it. It's a long, kind of drawn out thing, but we ended up buying 2 properties almost back to back or almost at the same time because we had one under contract, fell out. During that time, we found another one, got a hell of a deal on it, bought it, was up and running. So I was bringing up 2 at the same time.
Nice.
Crazy, man. But didn't have a job, so I had all the time in the world. So we just focused on it and got them
It's
going.
such
So
an incredible there's 2 forces competing with each other. One was you're getting really excited, you found something you felt that worked, and you wanted to scale that and push it, especially because for the first time in decades, you weren't working and you had the time and the energy and the money to do it. And then the other side is you're meeting these people who are more experienced and have potentially decades of real estate investing. And people like Coach Carson, I got his book right here on my shelf. He's become a mentor of mine too. And I have similarly made some adjustments to how I think about real estate from meeting these same people you're talking about. And I think it's amazing that you found them early enough in your journey that you could actually hear their perspective before you just go with your instinct to grow. So that's an extremely important part of what I just heard you say. But second is, to your credit, you found the model, you put proof of concept, like you said, you have a hypothesis, you test it out, it's working. So because of those two competing forces, you're able to have this, in Coach Carson's words, small and mighty portfolio. You got these three properties. They're working the way they're supposed to. You're going through the growing pains. You're figuring out the business model. Like you said too, Pad Split changed their fee structure after you started, right? That's stuff that you can't necessarily control. So if you had 10 of those and you were all of a sudden beholden to Pad Split and everything you built was based on them having a certain fee structure that you didn't know was going to change, that could completely alter your entire portfolio. So I think you've been able to enter in a strong position. And now I want to take it to where you said you're looking at an alternative model of co-living that is not as platform dependent on Pad Split. So what does that look like?
Well, there's two I'm exploring. One of them is the sober living, right? And we're still looking at that, and I like it. It's a time saver. So it's basically an arbitrage deal for them. I have the property and I lease it to them for 3 years, and they handle it. Well, there's that. But the other one is just running co-living myself. And it's a little weird because the first three I did were construction. Like I would do construction on the properties and add bedrooms. I was thinking of this next one, just leaving it as is, but also another pilot. I don't know. This is all like, limbo mode, but buying a property and living in it myself, like occupying one of the rooms and renting out the other three, because it just so happens when I went back to work, my market's Arizona. Well, it just so happens when I went back to work, a big chunk of my IT team is in Ocotillo, Chandler, Arizona. And I have people in New Mexico, Ohio, and Costa Rica, but that's a good chunk of it. And so I was like, well, cool. I could buy a primary, live in it, right? A low entry fee. How the people do the house hack, right? And they buy and then they move on for one, same thing. So I'd spend a lot of time down there, but then have the other renters basically pay for the house, basically break even on it. This one particular house we actually put an offer on. It they didn't get back to us. There was some talk, but we never closed on it. I said, "Hey, our offer's still there, and it's still on market right now. 82 days on market. Been under contract twice. Nice house, no HOA." But yeah, so we're exploring those two, and then I guess the third is, since my goal is cash flow, I went ahead. I wanted to be in the market for at least a year. I told myself, "Hey, focus, fixate on one course until successful." Okay, boom, we did that. I'm pretty positive, pretty sure we can run this. As a matter of fact, if I wasn't working in the W-2, I would be probably a property manager for co-living houses. And I know this is going to sound arrogant, but I know I'd kill it. I just would kill it. But then again, I don't want to create another job for myself. So there's that. But the other one is out of other states. So I live in Oregon, but invest in Arizona. I don't know if we said that in the beginning, but I'm looking at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, just for a cash flow play. I have capital just sitting there doing nothing. So I wanted to put it to use somewhere. So I'm talking to people in that space. So three different pivot points.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Remote Real Estate Academy, the community I launched last year where I personally coach investors and empower them to buy rental properties anywhere in the United States. My business partner Nathan and I have a collective 15 years experience with over 20 cash flowing out-of-state rental properties. We provide a step-by-step playbook on how you can build your own portfolio and start accessing the life-changing benefits of real estate investing starting today. Go to remoterealestateacademy.com for more info, or better yet, shoot me an email at aaron@aaronamin.com with subject line RREA, and I'll throw in a special bonus for podcast listeners who join the Academy. Now let's get to the show. In the third example, the Pennsylvania or the other long distance one, would those just be regular long-term rentals?
Yeah. Yeah. So those would be long-term rentals for cash flow, for time. Because ultimately, here's the funny part. This meets my goals right now. So in my corporate world, you set these goals and you work backwards, at least I do. And that's what I'm doing. But I'm also, as you grow, I think maybe Chad or Coach Carson or somebody says this long ago, as you grow, you change as a person, as an investor. And so I know that I've already changed probably 3 times. I didn't say this in the beginning, but in April when I started as a private money lender, right? And I still do that for my repeat borrowers and whatnot. But that's how I started. And then and then that actually proved that you could make money in this business. Granted, it wasn't actual purchases of property, but I was lending for people that were doing that, like flips and things like that. So I was like, holy crap, this works. So I made money and learned at the same time as I was doing my own research. But that's how actually I got started. But yeah, so I don't know. That's
No,
where
I
we're at
love that
now.
because it's always smart. So you said focus, fixate on one course until successful, right? That's the acronym.
Yeah.
So you've done that in the co-living. You've already validated the model. You've built out the three. What's the craziest part about real estate for most people is that you could do nothing else other than just have those three operate, continue to optimize them, pay them down, and you would probably end up in a great position long term. Michael Zuber, who's our common connection point, he has his very clear philosophy that if you buy four houses and only four houses, and you just let time do its trick, you'll be set forever. There's something to be said for the fact that you've already built the foundation. So now you have these three potential paths you could go down to continue to advance towards your goals: the sober living, either running another co-living that you self-manage with this kind of house hack strategy, or just do more long distance rentals. That's three different paths you could go down. I don't think that necessarily splits your focus because you've already validated the original idea and you already built the foundation. To me, that's more of a diversification and saying, hey, I have money that I need to put to work. I believe real estate is the best place to put that to work. I built this network and these connections and this knowledge over the last 2 years, and I'm going to explore one of these routes until I find something that fits my goals. And so I think I've been investing. I bought my first piece of real estate in 2017, started really ramping up in 2019. Things have changed, and I have been very singular on long distance single family rentals for that entire time. But now my wife and I are exploring different, pivoting towards stuff that's different than that. And I think that it's just important to recognize the evolution of life circumstances and goals, like you said. Even in less than 2 years, you mentioned that you've evolved, and what you're focusing on has evolved too. So I think it's exciting when you get to the turning point into a new chapter and you can just have an open book and explore until something that resonates comes back. So I don't know that you could go wrong with any of the stuff you mentioned, although I will click on one of those because you said, I don't want to build myself a second job. And self-managing and co-living is probably at least a half a job, right?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, that's right now. See, there's levels. That's why I like Coach Carson because he says it's like climbing a mountain. You know, you get to that first base camp, hang out. I've never climbed a mountain. I don't plan on it, but so like, excuse me if I'm screwing this up. But you get to these things and chill. Get to these things and chill. So that first one for me was that cash flow and that injection. So I don't plan on doing co-living forever. So I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but that's the plan for now, right? To get to that level, and then who knows what the future holds. But it was great because I wanted that cash flow. And, you have those different milestones, and we hit that milestone of having all our rental income pay for our bills, personal and business. So that was fantastic. I was like, holy crap. And so now the money we make with Intel just goes right towards real estate, right? So it's like, that's a good problem to have, but I can't just live off it because if something happens, if we have a bad month or something happens, we're screwed. So
That is a pretty damn good position to be in, I would say.
yeah, it was
Uh,
great. And it was kind of by accident. We only wanted to buy that second one, but because of the way things worked out, we ended up getting almost two back to back. I couldn't pass it up, and then boom, that thing ended up being just fantastic. And I got it for about 120 grand
yeah.
off. Right, it was an off market deal. The guy was in trouble, and so we bought it. It was awesome. And then we ended up finding out that that particular property with the solar was paid for. It had 65 kilowatt hours a day. Well, what I didn't know is when I got my first power bill, it was negative 34 cents. And this is in the summer. We're running the house at 72 degrees, right? And it turns out that purchase, that was a legacy thing. So it's a one-to-one. So anything it generates, it just cuts off the
Yeah.
bill. It's like, so we were paying, 400 on one and like 500 and some on another. So I was expecting a $500 or $600 bill, and it was negative 34. And that's just been awesome, man. So I got lucky on that.
Nice. You could say luck, or you could say you also, are seeking out all these opportunities and exploring all the signals. And sometimes stuff plays out a little better than others. And the more you lean into this stuff and get involved, the more likely you are to get lucky, right? By that definition.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't looking for that one. It came to
Yep.
me. Somebody said, "Hey," because the guy had bought it and rented it and did it. He took a 4.2 1/2 and turned it into an 8.3, an 8 bedroom, 3 bath, and then he tried to
Yeah.
sell it. There's not a lot of buyers for something like that. You know what I mean? then here I am, like, hey, and we negotiated for a few months, and he wanted like this outrageous number because he was trying to sell it as a
Yeah.
business, right? He actually tried for a couple months, it didn't work. So then he tried something else, it didn't work, and then he put it on pad split. So when I bought it, it was actually an active pad split with one member
Yeah.
in it.
Like you
Strange
said, it
deal.
takes a certain type of buyer. That's your average family is not going to walk in and buy that house with a pad split member already embedded in, right? He needed somebody very specific that was not only willing to do that, but knew how to do it. So sounds like he's the
Yeah,
lucky
yeah.
one that he found you at that time.
Yeah. It was a win-win. We both made out. I know he took probably a pretty good loss on it. Well, not a loss. He probably broke even or made a 20 grand or so. Because I happened to know the contractor who did
Yeah.
the work. And I've seen some of his other properties, and I even got bids from him before, and he's really good, but he's also really expensive. I couldn't
Yeah.
afford him. And so picking up this house that was done by him, double pane windows, it was, yep, man, it's so awesome. I got so lucky on that, dude.
Awesome. So there's one more topic I want to hit on, and we alluded to it at the beginning, but you have your own YouTube channel. You are, like I said, probably the most active member in that school community. I see you openly sharing what you've learned. You're always putting insights out and not only sharing your story, but just sharing your observations and the thoughts that you're having about the real estate environment openly across a number of different platforms. What inspired you to do that? And what are your kind of plans with that?
It's really all the people I've met. Like Dion, Michael Zuber, Matt the Lumberjack, Millennial Mike, Pace Morby. Like people don't give him enough credit, man. That guy's an ultimate go giver. He gets so much crap, but he's awesome. But all those guys combined shaved off years. I can't quantify it, but shaved off years of my personal investing. Like I'd be 10 years probably trying to get to where, because I can learn from these guys who are just giving it away for free. Oh, well, school's $20, but dude, $20. I mean, that is a no brainer. But like YouTube channels, I consume a lot of content. So I was able to, I estimate probably shaving off at least 2, maybe 3 years at the minimum, and probably 5, just by listening and learning from all these guys who've been there, done that. And so, yeah, I don't know anything, but I'm just gonna it was actually Coach Carson again. I love that guy. I was talking to him after he told me about, "Hey, slow down." And he said, I was like, "Yeah, I don't really have anything to give. I'm new." And he goes, "Yes, you do." He goes, "You've got experience here and here." It's like, "All right." And Pace Morby had said, "Hey, start your YouTube channel." I just start. So we did. And we did some stuff, and I was kind of, be honest, half-assing it. And then at that Zuber event, that was pivotal for me in February in Vegas. He had Sean Cannell there. Now I don't know who the hell that is. I know he's a big YouTube guy, and he said, "Hey, look, just press record, just start." So it sort of reinvigorated that YouTube thing, and I was thinking about it, like, yeah, man, okay, fine. And we were further along at that point too. I was like, all right, well, I can share stuff. If somebody gets value from it, great. And from a win-win perspective, I'm passing stuff out there, and also it's kind of like the modern day business card. Like, believe it or not, I have people throwing money at me, and I'm telling them no. I'm the biggest. It's probably dumb, but in my mind, I wouldn't invest with somebody that's brand new. I don't even have a year. I haven't even done tax returns yet, right? And I got these guys like, "Hey, I want to deploy capital with you." I'm like, "Cool, but dude, I don't know what the hell I'm doing." So I've been telling him no, and then I told Pace no too, which I've been kicking myself in the butt. I was down there at his house. We did a video on co-living and everything. He's like, because my flight was leaving that night at 7 o'clock. And he asked me to stick around, and I did, and got to meet a lot. It was awesome networking. And the next day, they were going to go do a big thing. And they're like, "Hey, a smart man would stick around." And I almost called the wife and told her I was going to cancel. But man, I missed my kids. I missed my wife. I'd been down there for a week. And I know a lot of people are going, "Oh man, you missed a bigger opportunity." And I probably did. But now I'm like, "Oh man, I should have stayed." But I was missing my family so much, man. I wanted to get back. So it is what it is. I think everything happens for a reason, and everybody does with what they're going to do. So, but I do think about it quite. And my wife's like, "You did what?" Sure. So like, I know, but I guys missed you guys. So anyway,
That's a
it is what
funny.
it is.
I don't think anybody, first of all, on their deathbed ever wishes they spent less time with their family. So kudos to you for having that gravitational pull. But then it is funny and ironic, right? You get back and you tell your wife about that. You should have stayed. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
but
Well, it's cool. I mean, we got to hang out. He did a video. It'll be on YouTube here pretty soon, and that's kind of neat. I have to go learn Instagram because I have it and I post stuff, but I really don't know how to use it. And so he goes, "Hey, how can people reach you?" I'm like, "Aria Jarrod on Instagram, right?" And I was like, "All right." So now I've been trying to figure it out and ask some people for some help. And because if once that video comes out, if people ping me, I need to know how to
I was on a
right.
Zoom with you yesterday, and you had a giant QR code in your background that said REI Jarrod. So I think you're figuring it out.
Yeah, I was in another video. I've seen that before, and I wasn't really big on it, but it's kind of selfish, really, because I get to learn. Most of the people I talk to, the goals don't work out or different things, but I learned so much from talking to different people, and it's amazing in the real estate community. It's really different. People are just willing to share and help, and it's a kind of a win-win, and that is cool. It's a huge bonus for the real estate investor community. Like, I think just about all of them are like that. I think the only thing that people don't readily share is maybe their
Yeah.
contractors. You know, Other than that, I think it's free game. I share the contractors. I'm like, hey, I use this guy. He's great.
It's
Blah, blah,
abundance
blah.
mindset. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful. There is, generally speaking, enough to go around. And other than, like you said, contractors, if you have a kick-ass contractor team and you're doing a few deals a year, then you don't want them to be tied up at the wrong time, which is understandable. But for the most part, yeah, people are amazing and really helpful. And I firmly believe what Coach Carson and what Pace and all these people have told you, which is if you've done any level of research or you have any experience, you can help the person that has no experience. And they're also more likely to learn from and relate to and listen to you than they are to Grant Cardone or someone who's totally 150 steps ahead of them, living in an alternate universe that has no relation to your current day state. So I think the channels of people that are early in their journey are very impactful and oftentimes in ways that you don't even understand yet. People, I am by no means have a big channel, but I've been doing this podcast for a little over a year, almost 60 episodes in. And I get people reaching out and sharing stuff that resonated with them or that impacted them in a certain way. And it makes it completely worth it just to be able to pay it forward, give some of that knowledge back, those insights, and also just build deeper relationships with people. Like, how often do you get to sit down and have an engaged 1 hour conversation with somebody, unpack everything about their journey, and then be able to share it with an audience? I think it's a really
Yeah.
good thing. And so I'll make sure we share all the links to your channel too. But on that note, where can people find you? How do you want them to engage with you if they want to get in touch?
Figured it out, but REIJARROD. So REI Jared on Instagram, and that's also the same on YouTube. But yeah, the Instagram thing I think is probably the easiest for people.
Awesome.
So
And we're going to have you back in 6 months or so, and we'll see which of those forks in the road you ended up taking. I like to have people
oh,
back periodically and just check in and see what they're up to. But you're an action taker. You're someone who I have developed a lot of respect for. I
oh,
appreciate what you're doing in the communities and also out in public. And who knows, maybe we'll be working together on something soon.
yeah, but that'd be
Awesome. Well,
awesome.
thanks for coming on, and we'll chat soon. Thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. As you may know, podcasts are very difficult to grow organically. If you're getting value from today's episode, I'd deeply appreciate if you can take 30 seconds to leave my show a 5-star rating and review. This will go a long way to helping me reach more listeners just like you. Thank you so much in advance.